Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about just the third round in the X2O Trofee and it took place in Loenhout. I will be joined by Twan and Issam to talk about it.
Hello.
Hey everybody.
As said, it was just the third round of the X2O Trofee whilst we are already at the end of December. This classification is really focused around the January month. Unfortunately in Loenhout, without the spectators which we know the race for, unfortunately also without Mathieu van Poel, who has been forced to cancel Loenhout and Hulst from his program following a return of his back injury, which he also had after the Olympics. But Wout van Aert was there, as well as a bunch of other riders, including Toon Aerts, Michael Vanthournhout and Issam, and Issam will tell us how they did in the race.
Yeah, indeed, in the beginning, Van Aert gave his opponents a little bit of hope. It was a good first half of the race from Zweek and Hermans. Aerts got in the first lap the sprint for the seconds, but after that was a little bit too focused on Issam, and then three guys got away with Zweek, Hermans and Wout van Aert. Vanthournhout has to come from the back, eventually joins the three in front and then puts them under pressure, but then Van Aert counters the attack of Vanthournhout, gaps everybody and then goes to his sixth victory of the season and in his sixth race. And yeah, then for second, Vanthournhout holds on very nicely for the second place, was just not able to challenge Wout van Aert. And in the end, Toon Aerts actually fights his way back in the second half of the race and gets the third place in Loenhout.
Not the most entertaining race today. Toon Aerts said it quite tellingly in his post-race interview, in my opinion. Wout van Aert was playing with us, and I guess we can conclude that that was the case, or at least that's how I think about it. I don't know how you guys think about that, but for me it looked like Wout van Aert was in control of this race for every single second of it and was just waiting, trying not to use as much energy as possible because he's still riding 4 races, Poel. Then after that he goes to Hulst, and after Hulst it's Herentals and then the Belgian championships. So I think he was just conserving energy here today, but nevertheless was in control of the race for the entirety of the race.
Yeah, there is nothing that can be disputed today. It was a little bit, I wouldn't say conservative with his energy in the beginning, but he let the others try and put him under pressure, but it was just a very controlled and smart race, especially for someone. And he knows the opponents that are here right now. There's no Pitcock, Van der Poel obviously not here. So then he kind of knows that he can do this kind of way of racing, and it's very efficient. With so many races still to come, 4 races in I think 10 days. So he knows he's very wise in what he does, and the deserved winner. So it was almost childish the way he rode away from Vanthournhout, but it's the facts at the moment, and he's just the stronger guy.
I mean, just looking at the lap times tells enough. I mean, for the beginning of the race, he just lets his opponent set the pace. Lap times were around 8 minutes. At some point, he sees that his opposition is burned up a bit because we had a very slow lap, 8 minutes and 10 seconds. And then Wout van Aert thinks, well, this is enough, 3 laps to go. He puts in a 7 minute 45, which is by far the fastest lap of the race. And yeah, it was almost more than 20 seconds quicker than the lap before. So that really just showed Van Aert in control. Then he puts in another fast lap, and then in the last lap he slows down again a bit, and Vanthournhout can come a little bit closer, but that all doesn't matter. Once again, just showing that Van Aert was saving the energy. However, I do think that Toon Aerts could have potentially been a bit closer. I don't know what you guys think about that, but in my opinion, Toon Aerts was the second strongest in today's race, but made one crucial mistake, and that was already in the early phase of the race when he was looking at Issam. So that meant that he let Van Aert go, actually, was chasing for the entire middle part of the race is what I meant to say just now. So after that, he just only kept on chasing. I think that was a crucial mistake, which was crucial to the race of Toon Aerts.
Yeah, I feel like it cost him quite a bit of time. Issam not quite on a good day, I think, and Aerts just didn't really recognize it and really tried to play for the classification today. And instead he just should have been trying to stay with the front group with Vanthournhout, Hermans and Van Aert. It's a very unfortunate mistake for him, but he still gained a load of time, so I'm sure he'll have been happy with today's result.
Of course, Aerts did a good job for his classification. We'll talk about that a bit later when we come and speak about the race of Elie Iserbyt. But I do think that Toon Aerts could have potentially been a bit closer, certainly in that second position. But then again, I mean, Van Aert was just too strong. And honestly, is there anything that can stop Van Aert except bad luck? I don't think so.
Well, we'll need to see how Van der Poel gets back, of course. Maybe that is the answer. But for now, I mean, especially on a course like today, where you can't really make too many mistakes in a way, it's quite easy to just follow people around for a while. Yeah, he can just play with them as much as he wants, and when he decides to go, he can have a few training laps and then cool down before the finish line.
Certainly, and I do think that even though we all knew that Van Aert was just playing around in the beginning, like a lion playing with his food, that's the way it looked. And despite that we knew that, this was more interesting than his race in Boom, where he just powered away in the second lap and we saw a solo for 50 minutes. This was more interesting, but yeah, I do think that indeed Van der Poel is the only thing, or potentially a very good pitcock maybe, but Van der Poel is probably the guy that needs to challenge Van Aert. But Van der Poel now out with a back injury. That news came after Zolder, so we haven't covered it in our podcast. Issam, could you briefly explain what the issue is with the back of Mathieu van der Poel?
Well, it appears that he has a swollen part, which is obviously hampering him a little bit. He has some pressure on it, which, you know, every movement that you make that will kind of hurt. It will hamper you during training, and it seems that it is an issue that has been in his preparation as well, going into this cyclocross season. So this is something that he already had before Zolder. But it just played up again, and it is at a state that he has to take some rest. You know, there are still speculations on what he's gonna do next, because some are saying that it's only going to be the 2 races. Some say it's 10 days of rest that he needs to take. So then Herentals also is going to be in doubt. So, you know, we don't know what the current situation is. It's obviously not looking good. We hope for Van der Poel a speedy recovery, because that's obviously not a way you want to end the season. But it's tough. It's tough, especially something that he has, you know, he had been dealing with this for a while, and it seems that it's not really solved. So yeah, let's hope for the season that that is going to be solved and that he can actually race on a respectable level. But it is looking harder and harder every day.
It certainly doesn't look good. This thing apparently goes back towards the Mountain Bike World Cup in Alpstad earlier last season, so it's definitely not good. But I do not want to be joining the speculation of how long it will take. I've also seen a lot of newspapers talking to specialists on these type of injuries who all have their own opinion, and then that's where it indeed comes from. Some say only 2 races, some say 10 days of rest, some say 1 month of rest, some say that he needs to take 3 months of rest because otherwise he's going to get a hernia, and that could then potentially even mean the end of his career. I think we should not join those speculations. We should just wait until the team comes with a statement, because the people who are involved around Mathieu van der Poel probably know exactly what's the case. They know what is going on with the back, they know what they've been dealing with, and that's much more important and valuable than what other experts might think, because they haven't seen the back of Van der Poel, they haven't been dealing with it for almost a year now. So I guess we just need to wait and see, and I expect a decision on the race in Herentals to be made fairly soon. And indeed we hope that he can recover quickly, because one, it's good for himself, but also, if we are a bit selfish, we want to see Van Aert battle with Van der Poel. Today then, no battle between Van Aert and Van der Poel, but for a while we had Vanthournhout sitting in the wheel of Van Aert. Twan, what did you think of the race of Vanthournhout today?
He's riding a very good Christmas period, and today was another one of those races. Yeah, just doing a solid job and benefiting from other people's mistakes, like Toon Aerts today, and well, best of the rest.
Do you potentially think that Vanthournhout could have done a little more? Because he was also caught behind the gap of Aerts, that Aerts let fall to be dealing with Iserbyt in the classification. Iserbyt said, "Doe maar," to Vanthournhout, which means go for it, close the gap. Vanthournhout needed to chase for almost 2 laps. we saw Sveik at the front there. Sveik wasn't really stopping the pace. Do you think that that could have potentially made things a bit easier for Vanthournhout at that moment in the race? Should Sveik have been dropping the pace instead of just sitting in the wheel and letting Hermans do big pacing to prevent Vanthournhout from coming back?
I think, of course, it could have helped, but at the end of the day, the gap to Wout van Aert was really big today. So second place was all there was, and he's already got it. So I don't think there's much point to it.
No, but on a day like today, it doesn't matter that much. I agree. But you should always do it just in case, in my opinion. You don't know what happens. Like, Van Aert can have a puncture, he can have a crash. He had made a couple of mistakes. He didn't put in a flawless race. At some point, it looked like Van Aert was gone, twice actually, but Vanthournhout was able to come back. So purely hypothetically speaking, in my opinion, you should always try things like that.
Yeah, I would agree in that way. But also I think like Sveik is having a rare good race this season, and he wanted to see how far he could take it, and I can very much understand that he should have tried to play the team card maybe a little bit to make sure that Quinten Hermans was putting up the pace as long as Wout van Aert was just chilling in the third wheel.
Yeah, because we usually see team games being played by the Poel Sauze team, or well, usually earlier in the season we do see them play around a bit, and I mean today we saw it once, they tried something, but then they annoyed Van Aert, so that was quite funny to see, because for once I was actually hoping to see some team tactics from them in the hope that they could challenge Van Aert, but Van Aert reacted as if Poel Sauze had stung him, like a bee had stung him, and he got angry. Like this one muddy section of 100 meters, he powered past the rest of the riders, bumped into the lead. Van Aert showing he's having none of it. He even put his shoulder into Vanthournhout, really showing, you don't play team games with me. So yeah, I don't think that if we look back at it, even if Sveik would have tried, I think Van Aert was having none of it. Van Aert had one mission today, win with consuming as little energy as possible, and he was not in the mood for team games, as we could see at that moment. Nevertheless, I mean, I have to agree, Vanthournhout putting in a strong ride today. The same goes for his teammate Laurens Sveik. Issam, what did you think about the race of Sveik today?
I think this is a parcours where Sveik normally has to, perform, and I think he did in a way. He was holding on quite well with Hermans and Van Aert, but it cost him a lot of energy, and in the end, that was a bit his problem in the end of the race, and that's why I guess Aerts and Van Kessel also passed him in the last couple of laps, and it's a very tough season for Sveik, so this is maybe it's maybe a race where he can get some positive points out of it, but it's not more than that. It's a bit showing for his season so far. This is nothing special what we have seen from Sveik. Normally a good Sveik would have been able to be fighting with Aerts and Vanthournhout, but today was only able to follow, and he didn't even play a very big role. So yeah, it is a good result, being fifth, but I don't think that he, considering who he is, would be happy with that, and I think he's not happy with his whole season. So I think for him it's a case of trying to get some positives out of this season, and slowly but surely look forward to the next season, and try to figure out what we can change for the next season, or what he can change.
Next season potentially involves another team for Laurens Sveik as well. The rumors are a bit old, but after last season, the rumors were there that he didn't want to extend his contract with the Poel Sauze team. There's been no news that he has extended his contract, and the rumors then linked him to Tormans, but also the Deschamps Hens Maas Group team has been linked to Sveik. Of course, the rumors are a bit old, so we'll just need to wait and see, but over the summer we'll without a doubt have some news on that. Let's run down our entire top 10 then. Van Aert, of course, took his 6th win in 6 races this season, becoming pretty dominant. Vanthournhout ended second ahead of Toon Aerts and Corné van Kessel. The 5th place went to Laurens Sveik, as we just discussed, just behind Corné van Kessel, who put in a very solid ride. The 6th place today went to Quinten Hermans, who had a bit of a blow-up, and this is only the 2nd time this season that he ends outside of the top 5. 7th place went to Felipe Oorts ahead of Tim Merlier, Vincent Baestaans and Toon van den Bos. Let's talk about the race of Felipe Oorts. He ended 7th. Very strong ride by the Spaniard, in my opinion.
Yeah, indeed. Very, very strong result from him. I guess, that's for him a little bit the goals, to try and get those top 10s in these televised races in Belgium, and he was riding a very, very solid race. I think the way he did his race was very good as well. Was very smart. He had something in the tank at the end of the race and was just able to pick his places. And I think overall, a very good result, and should be very proud of it, because it's very hard these days to get a top 10, and I think that is a hell of an achievement to get 7th in such a race.
Yeah, definitely a good result by Aerts. I think the same goes for Tim Merlier, who ends 8th, continuing his good form, who already had a top 10 in Dendermonde as well. So good to see Merlier up in the top 10 again after he was struggling last season. But we found out that last season he was suffering from COVID. He had that just prior to the season, but was still desperate to get some racing in. So good to see Merlier up there as well. Not a great performance today by Elie Iserbyt, ending 14th. What do we make out of his race?
He was a bit unlucky with in the pit box, because he had to change his bike. He was the first one entering the pit box, but he was one of the last to exit it. In the group with Aerts at that time, when I think it was lap 2, where Aerts and Iserbyt were a little bit focused on each other, a little bit too focused, and with the bike change, he gave his bike, but he never got his bike in a way back, so he had to wait a little bit, lost some seconds, valuable seconds there, and his race was a little bit run. He didn't really try to fight it, and with such a busy period, it's also very hard to fight a lost battle in a way. So I think maybe he already kind of knew that for this season in the X2O Trofee, the 2nd place was the highest achievable. So then it's not really worth to fight that hard for a race, fighting for position 5 or 6.
I mean, I do think that Elie Iserbyt is not in his best form anymore. He also said that he peaked for the early season, which is in contrast with what he said in the beginning of the season, when he said he was peaking for now, that he thought that he could beat Wout van Aert. Not happened so far. But then again, I do also agree that after that incident in the pits, his head went down. He probably lost motivation, and he threw away his opportunities of having a good classification here. He lost more than a minute today on Toon Aerts. He's now 2 minutes back in the classification. So that's the X2O Trofee over, in my opinion, for Elie Iserbyt. But then again, after his head went down, he also, he wasn't going 100% anymore. We saw a couple of shots of him, but he was most of the time just not driving 100%, saving himself a bit, which is smart in this busy period. But Twan, do you think that Elie Iserbyt should be thinking about skipping a couple of races? Because he's not skipped a lot of races this season. He hasn't taken a weekend of rest, just like Denise Betsema. If he wants to be good at the World Championships, do you think that it's time for Iserbyt to skip a couple of races?
I think he has to, but of course he'll see out the Christmas period and probably go after the Belgian Championships. At which point, I mean, he's just thrown in the towel basically in the X2O series by not really going all out and trying to limit the damages. So you might as well skip Hama. You're probably going to secure the World Cup in Holst. So there is room there for a bit of a break. So I think he should take it, try and get in form for the World Championships, of course, because there isn't much to gain in those 3 crosses that are after the Belgian National Championships until the World Championships. So I think he has to go on a bit of a break, yes.
The only thing it can secure is race rhythm, but Iserbyt not really a rider that needs rhythm, illustrated by always being very good in the first crosses of the season. So I would potentially advise him to go to Spain after the Belgian Championships, have a good training camp there, and then head over to the US nice and early, 1.5 weeks in advance, or maybe even 2 weeks. In this stage you can do good training as well. He can already practice the course a lot. He can really get one with the course, and as long as Van der Poel and Van Aert are not going to the World Championships, then I honestly don't put it past Iserbyt to become world champion. Of course, his form now doesn't indicate it. Of course, Tom Pidcock will be racing there. But then again, if he takes a really good approach towards that championships, starts there nice and fresh with his peak form, which he also had at the beginning of the season, then I don't put it past him that if Van Aert and Van der Poel don't go, that he can become world champion or otherwise stand on the podium, and that's also something that he hasn't achieved yet in the elite category. Let's then talk about our women's race. There was no Catablanca Vos and no youngsters in the persons of Pieterse and Van Empel, but Brand was there, so was Betsema, Worst and Kastelein, Alvarado, Van Anrooij, a bunch of others as well. And Twan will tell us what happened in that race.
It was a good start by Van Anrooij and Betsema, as they would immediately create a little bit of a gap. Eventually Brand would ride toward it at the end of the first lap. Not too happy about the fact that Van Anrooij would take the bonification seconds just in front of her, but she was a bit far back at the start of the straight, so in my opinion completely understandable. And they would go on. Annemarie Worst would at some point close the gap, but unfortunately couldn't keep it, and well, slowly but surely Brand and Betsema were going back and forth. Shirin Van Anrooij throwing herself in the mix, unfortunately would end up falling short, as the world champion would slowly but surely pull away from Denise Betsema. It is another victory for Lucinda Brand ahead of Denise Betsema and Shirin Van Anrooij.
Do we think that it's fair to conclude that Lucinda Brand rode the race in a similar way as Wout van Aert? Trying to control the race, not wasting too much energy, and then really securing the win in the final stages of the race?
I don't think the margin was as big as in the level difference between her and Betsema, but it is very similar indeed. Waiting a little bit while still trying to put on a little bit of pressure here and there.
Yeah, I had that feeling as well. I had the feeling that Brand was pretty strong. Maybe not as strong as Wout van Aert, or at least the relative comparison, of course. I don't think Brand was as much better as the rest than Van Aert was. Nevertheless, I had the feeling that Brand really gave Betsema the feeling that Betsema was in this race to win it. But then in the last lap, I mean, once again I will pull up the lap times to illustrate my point. The first lap of this race was very fast. It was 9 minutes and 6 seconds, which was the second fastest lap of the race. Then there were a couple of slow laps, 9:30, 9:12 and 9:15. And then in the last lap, when Brand really went for it, she puts in a 9:1, which is the fastest lap of the race. Betsema in that lap is only able to keep up the same pace as she was doing the laps before, which is a 9:16. So if we look in it that way, I feel like Brand in the last lap really had something left in the tank and was able to throw it out and gain 15 seconds. She lost 10 bonification seconds, so she gained 5 seconds in the classification, which is good news for her. Moving just a bit closer, only 1 minute and 28 seconds down now, coming from I think 3 minutes after the Koppenberg. That's definitely good. But Issam, Brand wins here, Betsema second. Do you think that Betsema could have done anything different today?
It is hard to say. I think that Betsema was very strong today. This was a very good day for her, I would assume, and she said it also in the interview, but she was maybe a little bit too focused on Van Anrooij, and because of that she felt that she had to put the pace the whole race in a way. And I think there was a lot of wind, and you know, if you're leading so long in the race and the differences are not that big, you know, you're kind of blowing yourself up and you're almost gifting a victories to someone else. So I think maybe she could have played it a little bit tactically, you know, better, but maybe she was also scared that if she wouldn't have taken the initiative, that Van Anrooij could play a role in the advantage of Lucinda. So I think that was probably something that played in her head, and that's why she wanted to put the pressure on. That takes a lot of effort, and yeah, in the end, you know, Brand was in the last lap, you know, what she always does, kind of put everybody on the pressure, very high pace. And then Betsema made a crucial mistake, and then, you know, the gap was there and she couldn't really get back. And, you know, if you give Brand 1 or 2 seconds, it's over. You cannot really gain that again because, you know, she's such a talented woman, very, very strong, and in the end, I think the deserved winner as well.
Definitely think that Brand was the deserved winner. Betsema once again continuing her habit of always riding. Could see it going into the final lap when she was pacing on the straight, but then again she didn't look to be pacing too hard, So I don't necessarily think that that was an issue. I think that Betse needs to gain a bit more confidence in her sprint, because judging by her post-race interview, she didn't have that. She said, maybe I was the strongest in the race today, but Trek played the team game. That's something I don't really agree with. I think Betsema wasn't the strongest, Brand was the strongest. I do understand that she has that feeling, but she in a way got tricked into that. But in my opinion, Trek also didn't play the team game against her. But overall a decent race. But that team game of Trek does bring me to the next rider I would like to discuss, Van Anrooij. We already talked about her in Zolder, that she put in a very good race despite a bad start. She did good. And that Christmas peak, that really is working for her. Going on that training camp in Val di Sole, she said she needed this race to gain confidence. Well, she certainly should have gained confidence here, because it went really well for her.
I think before the Christmas period, I was really thinking it's a bit unfortunate. She hasn't quite made the step that was maybe hoping for this year, of like a natural progression. Of course, still having maybe a little bit of struggles with the crash from last year. And I think we talked about it as well. Like, it might just be that this season it's not quite happening for her, that she decides to focus a little bit more on road. But this Christmas period has been absolutely amazing, and really taking some very good results, like today, looking very good.
Do we agree with what she said after the race, that she maybe should have taken a bit more initiative in that leading group?
Not really. I think, I mean, if you look at the time gap, it's already 33 seconds. Maybe she let it go a little bit at the end, but I already think she did plenty. For example, on the second lap, the start finish, like, she pulled quite a bit together with Lucinda Brandt, and maybe even ride a little bit more passively than she did today, because yeah, you're still not quite there.
Let's run down our entire top 10 then. Lucinda Brandt took the victory ahead of Denise Betsema, Sherin van Anrooij and Annemarie Worst, who put in a solid ride. 5th place went to Sanne Cant ahead of Dutch champion Celine del Carmen Alvarado. Ribarol gets another top 10 for once this season, ending 7th ahead of Jara Kastelein, Helene Clausel, and the 10th place goes to Anna Kay. Let's talk about Sanne Cant here. She gets 5th today. It's a solid performance. There's been a bit of talks the last couple of weeks in Belgium that they think she can aim for a podium at the World Championships. Based on this 5th place, do we think that that is realistic?
No, nowhere even close. There is about 7 women, I think, that can podium, with a few with a realistic shot at the world title. And then there's a whole bunch of women that I think are around the level that she is, and I think she's like, she would very much be pushing it if she got like a top 5, like 5th.
I do think that a podium is too much to expect for Sanne Cant, but this 5th place, in my opinion, is a very good result. She does beat Alvarado in the sprint, and yes, a podium is not going to be likely, I agree. I think that Brandt and Betsema, and today she also gets beaten by Worst, and then on the World Championships I expect more from Honsinger. You would hope Rochette gets back to form, Vos is going to be there, Vash is going to be there, and the list continues. So no, I don't think a podium is realistic, but then still I would like to come back to the ride of today. I do think that Sanne Cant puts in a very good ride today, and that also brings me to the point, I think that Cant is simply doing too many races this season. Because always on the Saturday, she's much better than on the second day of racing. I mean, if we look at it, for instance, in Meulenbeke this year, okay, there was not a great start list there. She wins, but her level on that Saturday was higher than on the Sunday in Gieten. If we look further through the season, again, in Ruddervoorde, not the greatest start list, but it was alright, her performance. The day after in Zonhoven, she struggles more. Then the Monde was also a solid performance by her. Then Heuse Zolder the day after, she struggles a lot. And this continues throughout the season. The same goes in Rukve, 8th place, the day after in Namur, 21st. Kortrijk, 6th, Besançon, 18th. I think that Cant has come to a point where she is doing too many races, probably because most of these races still pay her a nice contract, based that she's the best Belgian, based that she is also the Belgian champion. But it's perhaps just a bit too much. I think that if she would focus a bit more on one race a weekend or just choose her classifications, maybe not the World Cup, then she could do a bit better than she's doing now in some of the other races. But then again, I also agree with Twan that the podium at the World Championships is not likely. But now we also have to conclude that the podium at the World Championships for Alvarado is not likely. Or do you think differently about that, Issam?
Well, I think about Kant and the way she's doing her calendar, that is a bit how Kant always does her seasons. She's someone that always loves to ride, and I think it's a fair point to say that it's maybe a little bit too much, because maybe she asks a lot to be on that level of a top 10, that the race after it in the same weekend, the double weekend, is for her just a little bit tougher than if it's only a single weekend. So that's maybe something she can look at for the summer. But I think for Kant's sake, on the podium on the World Championship, I think that she needs a lot of circumstances that needs to go her way in a way. So I think it will be very tough. A top 5 would already be a very good result. And for Alvarado, the situation is getting more and more difficult in a way. I mean, today was an okay race, 6th, but then again, getting beaten by Kant, I don't think that is something Dutch women really want, especially knowing where Kant comes from in a way. So I think that it's going to be very tough for Alvarado to fight back, but there are still a couple of weeks to go to the World. So if she can really bring it up, there is still a chance, but it's gonna be hard. But when you go to a Worlds and you have a good preparation, you never know. It's a World Championship in the end, and people can surprise, but the logic is always there. So we will have to wait and see for that.
Another strong name in the top 10 is the name of Ribeiro. Bit of an anonymous race in terms of attention on the broadcast. Sometimes I wish we would see more of the action there, but nevertheless, a strong result. She will be hoping she can repeat this at the Belgian Championships so she can do a throw towards the national title. Unfortunately, Ribeiro will not be allowed to race the World Championships because her nationality change is too recent for that. So that's unfortunate for her. Outside of the top 10, I do see a couple of interesting performances. First of all, in 12th place, we see Clara Honsinger, who struggled a lot with the start. She ends ahead of Katie Klaus, who ended 13th. So I think for Klaus, that's a fairly decent performance. For Honsinger, it's a bit disappointing. A very bad start for Honsinger. If you're interested in hearing more from these two riders, I recommend checking out our podcast. We made an interview with them just a week ago, so that should be up there somewhere in your feed. Definitely interesting. That will explain why Honsinger struggled with the start. She said there that she doesn't have the snap and is sometimes a bit frightened. Today it was more a case of being frightened because in the first corner she was actually in the wheel of Brand and then lost out. But that's a shame to see. Don't know if any of you two still have a comments on the performances of these two Americans here just outside of the top 10.
I think for Honsinger's sake, it's difficult. I mean, when it's two laps or 3 laps and you're already at 2 minutes, it's very hard to then come back. And then this is a race where the differences are not really that big, and especially for her, it's this should be something she should be a little bit more ahead. But it is what it is. You cannot change that, and hopefully in the races that suit her a little bit more, she can then fight it a little bit out for the top 5. I think for Klaus is an okay result. She has being ahead of some decent women. I think this is one of the better results of the last 2-3 weeks. So I think this is it's okay. It's not like Besançon, but maybe that's coming, and it's a line that will go upwards in the coming races.
Behind the American duo, we see a British duo, Zoe Buxted and Hernan Harnden. Both of them put in a very solid performance today, especially Harnden. I wasn't expecting a lot from her today. 15th is a lot better than what I remember her doing in cross.
I mean, the start list is of course not as good as possibly could be, but indeed she did ride a very good race. If you look back about 2 seasons, you see like 25th-ish places, I think. So yeah, really making a nice step, and hopefully she'll continue to race throughout the Christmas period, and we can see more of what her level is at the moment.
Start list definitely not at the highest level possible today, but if we look back in this season, in the Jingle Cross, the non-UCI event, she ended 4th behind Sunny Gilbert and fighting with riders who I personally never heard of, like Tyler Kuyek-White and Jennifer Melik. So definitely an improvement on that end. A bit further down, we once again see another solid performance by Zemanova, who is just 1 year older than Zoe Buckstedt. Buckstedt skipping the junior women's race today and racing the elite race. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this mixture. I feel like this is something that's a loophole in the UCI categories. I don't blame Buckstedt for doing this because she is simply too good for the junior category, and it's better for her development to race in the elite category. But I feel like it's a loophole that if you do, as long as you do the World Cups in the category, then you can race the elite, well, the World Championships, I mean, in that category. And that's a bit of a loophole in my opinion, because it kind of devaluates the value of the junior women's race, and that's not something it can use, because we should be happy that this is one of few races in Belgium that does have a junior women's race. So let's be happy for that. But once again, I don't blame Buckstedt because this is simply the best for her development. Also just mentioned Zemanova, 18th. And Zemanova is, in my opinion, the front runner in a very talented generation of Czech riders. Today in the youth categories we saw plenty of that, didn't we?
I think especially if you take a look at the women's junior race, right? We have 4 Czech women in the top 7 even. An absolutely amazing achievement. Getting that 2nd place as well. Some of them first years, well, the one taking the 2nd place is first year as well, so it's really promising as well. In the U23 race, Stransky managing a 13th place as a first year U23 is really impressive.
Yeah, definitely, and I was really impressed by Glaskova, who we already seen a bit from her this season, but she ended 2nd in the junior women's race, only 16 years old, first year under 23. They also have Hanna Kova, who is the same age, so certainly a lot of Czech talent coming through. And earlier this year we spoke with Petr Dlask, the former star from the Czech Republic. He's guiding these riders, that's the right word. He guides them through the world of cyclocross and does his best to keep them in the cross. Most of them also don't race road, they do mountain biking, and they really want to combine it with cyclocross. So I'm really happy to see that. Especially the top 10 today was so international in the junior women's race. We had 4 Czech riders in the top 10, 1 Dutch, 2 Canadians, 2 Americans, and just outside of the top 10 we see a bunch more of a Brit, another Canadian, a couple of Americans, and that's really good to see, and I remain optimistic that these riders will stay in the sport and that we can see a bit more of international talent come through in the women's category. In the men's category I'm not as optimistic, but let's not go into that too much because then we can keep talking for quite a while. But yeah, I think we've covered it for Loenhout. The next race on the calendar is Poel on New Year's Day. Twan and Issam, thank you too for being here to talk about Loenhout.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for hosting and thanks for having me.
As said, we'll be back after Poel with a new podcast, and the day after that another new podcast for the World Cup in Hulst. So thanks again for listening. Share, give a rating if that's possible on the platform you're listening on. So that means on YouTube it's possible, on Spotify it's possible, and on Apple Podcasts it's possible. And we'll be back in the new year. Goodbye.